We're going to be opening your Bibles. Isaiah chapter 56. Isaiah 56. We have visitors with us tonight. You would think on a Wednesday night there wouldn't be any visitors, but we do have some here. Thank you for coming. I've heard Joseph Cashmere say many times before, if you're familiar with Brother Cashmere, he'll say, I love Wednesday night Christians. I know exactly what he means by that, and I think you do too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to be a part of this study and to encourage and edify one another. And hopefully tonight will be a lesson that would encourage us and to be better and to take advantage of this wonderful gift that we have. In Isaiah 56, there's this prophecy being made that you and I ought to be very, very happy about. It's a prophecy about a day coming when all would be accepted to God. Now we would know that would become in fruition in Acts chapter 10, but here was a prophecy long before that. I'm going to pull out a couple of phrases from it. Isaiah chapter 56. Start with me in verse 6. The sons of the stranger that joins themselves to the Lord to serve Him and to love the name of the Lord, to be His servants, everyone that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it and taking hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain. I will make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be acceptable to my altar. For my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. Here's Jesus, or Isaiah prophesying of a day when sacrifices and prayers accepted to Him. And me and you as Gentiles are a part of this prophecy being fulfilled. How thankful we are for that. But it's interesting that twice Isaiah talked about a house of prayer. This, by the way, is what Jesus was quoting when, remember, right that last week before the crucifixion when He overturned the money tables. You've turned my Father's house of prayer into a marketplace. This is what He was quoting. It's what He wants from us. So I want to ask the question, does it characterize us? A house of prayer to describe God's people and the sacrifices that we alter. Does our prayer life differentiate us? Think about that. That's kind of humbling, isn't it? Would people say of us as individuals or as a local group, that's the prayingest bunch of people I know? Would they say that about you? Would they say that about me? Would they say that about us? If in a private room by ourselves, if questions like this were asked, how do you feel about your morals? I'm guessing the answers will go something like this. Well, like everybody else, I've got some weaknesses. I've got some of those intense desires that I'm working on. I struggle from time to time, but how do you feel about your worship? Well, sometimes my mind will wander. Something is said, and it makes me but I pull it back. How do you feel about your priorities? Sometimes worldly things do kind of take precedent, and I know that's wrong, and I'm fighting that. How do you feel about your private prayer life? Well, we don't even pretend, do we? I don't know that there'd be a person in this room who would be completely satisfied with their private prayer life. I don't know there'd be a person in this room who would say, my private prayer life couldn't get any better. I don't even think we would pretend. Sweet hour of prayer. We sing that song. And I know that it could very well be that sweet hour of prayer is talking about what we're doing right now, the hour of worship. But let's just take it at its language. Sweet hour of prayer. How long does it take me and you in our private prayer life to get an hour of prayer? Is that a week worth of prayer to get an hour? Is that a month worth of prayer to get an hour? It's a great missing piece of probably most of our lives. And you know who's happy about that? Satan's happy about that. The last thing he wants is for our communication with God to improve. Our closeness with God to improve. He wants to keep our private prayer life a secondary action. But we're going to work on that tonight. And we're going to talk about that tonight. And I'll just pause and ask the question. Anybody feeling uncomfortable already? Turn to Romans chapter 8. If you're feeling uncomfortable, you're in good company. We are not the first who would say, I have some struggles with this. I have some problems with this. Romans chapter 8. Here's Paul, and it's going to encourage us, I would think. Here's Paul saying, I'm right there with you. Here's Paul saying, I struggle too. Read verse 26 with me. Romans 8, verse 26. Likewise, the Spirit helps our infirmities, for we know not what we should pray for as we ought. Now, I understand maybe Paul's writing with the, what do we call that? That royal we. I'm just going to take it as some encouragement. I'm just going to take it as Paul jumping into the boat with us and saying, hey, I can struggle with that too. Sometimes we just don't know how to do it. Sometimes we don't know what to say. But the Spirit, if we were to keep reading, but the Spirit intercedes for us. We have deities on our side. But there is a little bit of a source of encouragement when Paul says we struggle with this. That's a small source of encouragement, but let's make sure we understand it's not an alibi. Turn to Matthew 7. Here are some of the ways we could be failing at it. Matthew 7, right smack in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. Here's one of our issues. Matthew 7. Verse 11. Matthew 7, read with me verse 11. If you being evil know how to give good gifts to your children. Let's pause right there. That's me and that's you. We all know how to give good gifts to our kids. We know what they like. We know what they love. We know what would go perfect in this little knick-knack corner thing. And we know how to do it. I mean, you've got weakness after weakness that we've been working on this week, right? If we being evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven, who is not evil is the inference, him and all of his goodness, how much more could he give good gifts, good things, to those that ask him? To those that ask him. Sometimes we just don't ask. Sometimes it's not, how much have we left on the table? Because we don't even ask. Just as a confession for myself, and when I was still coaching, and Carl and I had already made the decision that we were going to move to Oak Grove, Florida, and start teaching. We put our house on the sale, on the market, and we got a guy from Auburn, a family from Auburn, was going to buy it. He was working at the Trenton Jones Golf Course, and he was going to be transferred to the RTJ in Muscle Shoals. So we've got a house picked out. We have to sell ours before it can go through. The guy down here, the family here, wants our house. This one has to sell. They were selling it to somebody in Mississippi. That house had to sell. and one day, I'm just thinking, I've got about as much control over this as a bluebird. Here we are 4 levels away. And one day, so I'm telling the coaches that I work with, we're sitting at lunch, and I'm telling them about it, and I'm telling the people that helped them drive about it, and one day, I'm telling everybody about this except the creator of heaven and earth. I'm telling everybody about it, but I wasn't praying about it. He knows how to help. He knows how to give good things. The problem is sometimes we just don't ask him. Sometimes that's the problem. Turn to James chapter 4. Sometimes asking isn't the problem. Sometimes it's the motive behind the request. James chapter 4. Read with me verse 3. James 4 verse 3. You ask. Okay, so this is not the Matthew 7 issue. These people they're wearing their knees out. You ask But you receive not because you ask amiss, that you may consume it, you may spend it upon your lust. We talked about that last night. So there's the issue, sometimes we don't ask, we don't even talk to him. Sometimes we are asking, but it's for selfish, impure reasons. The motive isn't right. And not asking with the wrong. Do we need some help? Do we need to be better? Lord, increase our faith. How about we do this? How about we do what we talked about last night? Tonight, let's hold the mirror up and let's see the glory of Christ, and let's try to imitate, let's try to transform into what we see. What we're going to do tonight, for the most part, we're going to look at Jesus' prayer life. How did he do it? When did he do it? Why did he do it? We're just going to look at how he prayed. Because if our goal, and Ryan mentioned that in his prayer life, if our goal is to be Christ-like, if it's to be more like him, more like God wants us to be, well, let's go to the master teacher, because he has a lot to teach about prayer. Turn to Luke 11. And before we start looking at his specific prayer life, let's just make sure we have it locked down solid that this is something we can be better at. Luke chapter 11. Read with me verse 1. We're not the only ones who want to be better at it. We're not the ones who maybe didn't ask or asked amiss. Look in verse 1. It came to pass that as he, Jesus, was praying in a certain place, when he stopped, one of his disciples said unto him, Lord, teach us to pray. John taught his disciples to pray. Will you teach us to pray? We're not the first ones doing what we're doing tonight. We're not the first ones who was willing to admit, I can be better at this. I want to be better at this. Teach me to be better at this, Lord. A couple of applications to pull from this before we move on. What this question, or not question, but what this statement was, Lord, teach us to pray. It tells us there was something about Jesus' prayer life that stood out. You think Peter had never prayed? You think Andrew had never prayed? You think... But there was something, whatever it was, there was something they saw. And they said, his prayer life doesn't look like mine. Something got their attention. And they wanted it. There's an application. Here's a second application. You know what they could have done? They could have done maybe what we do sometimes. They just kind of look out of the corner of the eyes. And then just started trying to copy him. They don't want to just ape him. They don't just want to mimic him. They don't want to, okay, here's what he did, so let me just imitate. No, they want some information. They want to know how. Teach us. I don't want to just watch you. Teach us. And the wonderful application to be made is in verse 2. He said unto them, when you pray, and then off he went. It is learnable. Aren't you glad the conversation doesn't go like this? Lord, will you teach us to pray? I would if I could. I would love to teach you that, but that's just an innate thing. You got it or you don't. Aren't you glad that's not how that conversation ends? Lord, teach us to pray. Okay. When you pray, here we go. And he begins to teach them. It's learnable. We can be better at it. We can get more like him. It is an attribute. We can become Christ-like. It's not like he's saying, we go get some track coach and we say, okay, I want you to teach me how to run a 4.240. I'll bet you would. But that's not happening. This is learnable. This is doable. But we've got to put some work in. What we're looking at tonight is a study of private prayer life. Jesus prayed publicly. We have record of that. He prayed before the feeding of the multitude. He prayed on the cross. But we've got 3 times or so more record of his private prayers than we do his public prayers. Well, does that not make sense? Think about the public times when we were together. 4 hours a week or so? I don't mean to be ugly. But if the bulk of our prayer life happens when we are together, then our prayer life needs work. 4 hours of a week. If we don't have to talk about the public prayers, they take care of themselves. There's not going to be public assemblies of God's people where prayers aren't a part of it. That's going to happen. Private prayers. We're away from this place a lot. We're away from each other a lot more than we are together. That's what we're working on. That's what we're talking about tonight. And so we're going to follow his example. So let's go look at his example. Let's just let them pile up into a big heap. Turn to Mark chapter 1. Mark chapter 1. We're looking at Jesus' private prayer life. And what we want to do is take his private prayer life and let it become my prayer life, your prayer life. Look in Mark 1 with me. Verse 35. We'll go back and set the context in just a moment. For right now, let's just read it. In the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out, departed to a deserted place, and there he prayed. Again, before we set the context, let's just let that soak in. Break the phrases down. He rose up early before the sun came up. No alarm clock, but he gets up where it would be quiet, it would be peaceful. It's before everything is stirring. And by the way, this would have been after a very busy day. Look back into verse 21. Let's just kind of highlight the day before. Verse 21, he goes to Capernaum and went on the Sabbath day into the synagogue and taught. The day before this getting up early, he's teaching, preaching in the synagogue. Drop down to verse 28. Unclean spirits were brought to him. He's healing demoniacs that day. Look in verse 30. Into the day, he's at Simon Peter's wife's house, and his mother-in-law is sick. He ends up healing her. In verse 32, when the sun was going down, the whole city basically just a moth to flame. Sun's going down, they know he's in the house, and they bring all manner of sick people to him. What a day. Teaching, miracles, traveling from one place to the other, and when the sun goes down, people are still there. And then this is the night that he goes to bed and gets up a long time before the sun. You think he was tired? You think he might have been worn out a little bit? Sometimes we may have trouble. We don't have trouble seeing Jesus, the Son of God. Maybe our problem is we have trouble seeing Jesus, the Son of Man. He would have been as tired as me and you would have been that day. He would have been worn out as much as me and you would have been. He probably would have liked to have slept in a little bit. But prayer meant more to him. So without telling anybody, he gets up and goes to this deserted place wherever it was. But this gives us a clue. When the sun does come up and the other disciples start looking around for him, look in verse 37. When they found him, where did he go? I don't know. But he wasn't in sight. They got up, they're looking for him, and they have to go hunt him. He separated himself pretty good. The point is, we talk about finding time. Or if I could find the time. Jesus didn't find anything. Jesus made the time. He carved out of his cycle, carved out of his day, of his night, a time. That's Jesus' private prayer life. Turn to Matthew 14. Matthew 14. Is Matthew 14 a memory chapter for you? When you hear Matthew chapter 14, does an event come to your life? Or come to your mind, rather? Matthew chapter 14 It's the feeding of the multitude. When a little boy with a couple of sardines and some crackers fed thousands. Busy day. Been a long day. Look in verse 22. At the end of that long day, and straightway, Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him to the other side while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went to a mountain separately to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. Another busy day, another tiring day. While he could have jumped in the boat with the other guys and maybe caught a little nap as they went across the Sea of Galilee. Instead, he sends them on and finds him a place to pray alone. I just wanted to come to Matthew 14 to emphasize this. What we saw in Mark chapter 1 wasn't the outlier. What we saw Jesus do in Mark chapter 1 wasn't the exception. That was the rule. That was just what he did. And here he is doing it again. No matter how busy, no matter how tired, no matter how time constrained he was, it was not going to interfere with him talking to the Father. Look in Luke chapter 5. Think about how Jesus' fame grew. And even in both of those events that we just looked at, in Mark chapter 1, you had the multitudes finding him. They knew what house he was in, and there they are. In Matthew chapter 14, you've got, we call it the feeding of the 5,000s, but that was just the men. Well, you're one or the other. If there's 5,000 men, likely there would have been close to 5,000 women, let's say. Some of those would have had children. And we talk about feeding the 5,000. He fed a whole lot more than that. That was a big crowd. And yet he's able to get away. The crowds just found him. Look in Luke 5, verse 15. So much more as his fame spread abroad. So it's just more and more hearing of him, what he's done, what he can do. Great multitudes came together to hear, to be healed of their infirmities. And the old King James says, and he withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed. Here's the crowds. Here's the multitudes. Fame spreading. We talked last night about lust and desires, and don't think because money doesn't control us or maybe sex doesn't control us that we don't have to worry about coveting. There's a lot of things to covet. There's a lot of people in this world who covet fame. In Hollywood, they pay people to bring crowds around them. They've got publicists to make sure their fame grows. Here's Jesus got it. He's got what people desire and intensely want. And the old King James says he withdrew himself. The newer versions, and maybe the New American, I can't remember, some of the newer versions say he slipped away. He slipped away into the wilderness. How do you picture that in your mind? Withdrawing himself. Slipping away. Fame, crowds, multitudes. Do you picture that as okay, let me get everybody's attention. Now don't sweat it, but I'm just going to slip away for a little bit. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. Is that what slipping away means to you? You think that's how he did it? Or can you picture maybe the multitude? Where is he? Well, he was over there. Where did he go? Well, he left here and went, and said, let's just start looking around. Where is he? It'd be interesting to know if some of the disciples, when everybody's looking for him, where did he go? I wonder if any of them smiled inside. They've seen him slip away before. They woke up and he's not there. I wonder if any of them got an idea. I think I know where he went. Turn to Luke 6, next page over. Prayer more important than sleep. Prayer more important than comfort. Prayer more important than attention and fame. And prayer when you need it. Look in verse 12. Luke 6, verse 12. Came to pass in those days that he went out to a mountain to pray. Well, we've seen that before, huh? And he continued all night in prayer to God. For lack of a better phrase, let me just call it spot prayers. Spot prayers have a role. Do you remember when Nehemiah stood before the king? He had found out about the wall, and he's gotten the king's audience, and it's almost like he walks up to him, and the king goes, "What do you want?" And it says, Nehemiah prayed. You remember that? Do you think he said, "Right, I'll be right back," and goes over to a corner to pray? No. I would imagine Nehemiah did what me and you've done a lot of times. Help me, Lord. Help me say this right. Be with me. There's a place in that for us. There's a place in life when we have, but if that's, there's got to be something deeper than that. Here's Jesus all night in prayer. Let me just pause and ask the question, a silly question. I don't know who the internet providers are down here. I don't know if it'd be AT&T, Spectrum, or whatever. But whoever your provider is, did you call today and speak to tech support? Did you call them up? Probably not. You know why? You didn't have an issue. You see, we don't call up the tech support to chat. We don't call tech support just to see how their day's going. No, they are troubleshooters. And we call them when something bad is going on. Do we treat God like tech support? He's just a troubleshooter. You know, when something happens we can't take care of ourselves. Here's Jesus all night. What would make him pray all night? What would make you pray all night? Something's going on. Look up one verse. We talk about the importance of context. Verse 12, he prays all night. 11 and 13 tells us why. Look in verse 11. They, Jewish leadership, they were filled with madness. They commanded one with another what they might do with Jesus. The hatred is growing. The rage is growing. There are people already wanting and planning and trying to figure out how do we take him out. And he spends all night praying. Look in verse 13. When it was day, after he has been praying all night, when it was day, he called unto him his disciples, and of them he chose 12. You know why he was praying all night? This wasn't a normal night. You've got enemies on one side doing what they are ultimately going to be successful trying. And you've got this incredible decision to make. Disciples that he is whittling down. We don't know how many disciples there, but we know how many he chose, don't we? The youngest of children in here know how many he chose, and the youngest of children know their names. This was the night he's deciding that. Of his disciples, he's picking out the 12. And he's praying about that. We won't turn to Mark 14. But if you remember, that was the night of the garden where Judas had already gone off to finish his plan, but Jesus left the upper room with the 11. Remember that they're singing a song, they get to the garden, he leaves 8 of them back and goes in with 3. Then he takes those 3 and leaves them back and goes out farther by himself. Twice he separates himself and goes in alone to pray. So again, sleep not more important than prayer. Comfort, not more important than prayer. Attention, not more important than prayer. Companionship, and those were good companions he kept putting behind him. Companionship, not more important than prayer. And when there were enemies bringing stress into his life, he's praying. And when there were important decisions to be made, he's praying. Why would we do that? We're seeing the whens, the whys, the hows, we're seeing a lot about what made him go to his Father. Why would we imitate it? Turn to Matthew 6. Here's why. There are incredible blessings that come through private prayer life. Again, we're not talking about public. That takes care of itself. Private prayer life. There are blessings that come from private prayers. Look at Matthew 6. Read with me verse 5. When you pray, enter into your closet. He's talking about the same thing we're talking about. This is private prayer that is up for discussion here. When you pray, enter into your closet. And when you shut the door, pray to your Father, which is in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. Why would you want your private prayer life to improve? Well, as we've seen tonight, it would make us Christ-like. Well, that's a pretty good starting point, right? A starting point and ending point. But here's something we can throw in the middle of it. These secret things, these secret prayers, these private prayers, God notices that. God acknowledges that. God rewards that. Does it make you want it? Does being Christ-like with our prayer life make you want it more? These rewards of God acknowledging and hearing and responding, does it make you want it more? If you and I only pray in public settings where there is an audience, if we only, you imagine a family that doesn't pray. Oh, but you got some brethren coming over, and now all of a sudden you want to pray, and the children don't even know what they're doing. You know, they're already grabbing for bread and eating, and they don't know what's going on. We don't do this normally. Welcome to the street corner. Welcome to the street corner. Effective prayer is honesty in its communication, and public prayers don't always hit that. Public prayers, the prayers that are led here and in other churches and other assemblies, they don't express where we are privately. I don't know if I'm getting this across right. In our public prayers, here's what we say. Forgive us of our sins. Forgive us when we fail you. But we're talking for hundreds of people. Forgive us of our sins. That doesn't wash in a private prayer. Now, you can't talk generically in a private prayer. Lord, this is what I did. I'm sorry. I could have been better. I should have been better. I will be better. We got to talk blunt. We can't talk generically in a private prayer. We're not talking about sins as if they're just... We got to call it out. Private prayers are different. Private prayers bring closeness and builds relationships between us and God. And if we're not doing it well, if we're not doing it enough, if it's not part of our life like it was His, then there's a big part of our life that's missing. Here are some things that we would think of as I don't want to say excuses or reasons, but if we were pressed, why is our private prayer life not what it ought to be? I'm just, really, really busy. There's some truth to that. Satan's best lies are when there's a little bit of truth, right? We are busy. We talked about that earlier in the week. Busy with work, busy with school, busy with family, busy with civic responsibilities, busy with local church responsibility, all good in of themselves. But they all just take out a big chunk of the pie, right? And so the end of the day comes. The end of the day has almost come, hasn't it? How much private prayer happened today in your life? We're in total control of it. Nobody could stop you from private prayers if they wanted to, because it's private. How much did you pray today? We get to the end of the day, I'm just so busy. Now, first of all, there's always a Bible answer. And the Bible answer is, Jesus was busy too, and He made time. So there's an answer. But what I want to pose is that really our problem, though? I'm busy, really busy. So now let me throw out a hypothesis. Let's imagine tomorrow the text chain blows up. Bam, 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 beeping. And you look at it, and one of you, terrible wreck out on 280. All that the information is, They were life flighted. They're on the way to UAB. I don't know. How many in this room says this tomorrow? Boy, I sure wished I could pray about that, but I'm just so busy. You know how many in this room say that tomorrow? Nobody in this room says that tomorrow. You stop right then and you talk to the King. That's really not the problem. Well, what is this the problem? I just don't really know how to pray all that well. I don't know what to say. Now, for those of you that were born and raised and you've been praying all your life, that might not resonate. There's some reality to that. I was 19 years old or so before I had it was weird when I'm trying to train myself and I'm going into my room and I'm talking and I'm praying. And it don't look like nobody's home. There was some, I don't want to say uncomfortable. It wasn't uncomfortable, but there was some weirdness to it. And in a room this big, there's some people in here who know exactly what I'm talking about. Is that really the problem? Well, first of all, there's a Bible answer for that. We know not how we should pray as we ought, but the Spirit intercedes for us. So again, there's a Bible answer for that. But I want to pose this. Is that really the problem? Is that really the problem? Scenario number 2. Text chain blows up tomorrow. One of you, bad fall. All I know is there's a brain bleed. They're at EAMC. I don't know. It's serious. Who in this room tomorrow says, I would love to pray about that. I love that sister. I love that brother. But I just don't know how to talk to God. I just don't know what to say. You know who says that tomorrow? 0 people say that tomorrow. You just pray. Well, here's scenario number 3. I just don't feel worthy. I don't feel worthy to talk to God. Well, amen to that. We're not worthy for any blessing He gave us. You think you're worthy for heaven? You think you are worthy to receive grace and mercy and long-suffering and patience? And we're not worthy. But there's a Bible answer. He takes us in, and there's a relationship He wants to develop. He thinks high of us. A royal priesthood. That's what He thinks of us. David was a king. He's royal. Eran is a priesthood. Me and you're both a chosen generation. A peculiar people. 7 billion people. And His children are peculiar. A globe of 7 billion, and He can pinpoint every one that's peculiar to Him. He knows which one is a son and which one's a daughter. We're not worthy. This relationship between us and Him is special to Him. So there's a Bible answer to that. But I'm going to ask again, is that really the problem? Is that really what's holding us back? Because scenario number 3, tomorrow you get called in bright and early for a meeting, and the boss walks in and says, I don't know how to break this to you. I am very sorry, but I just got word from corporate. Half of you is going to be laid off. There's going to be a refiguring. There's going to be some shutdowns. I don't know which ones it's going to be. We're not going to find that out till Friday morning. You know who says, boy, I sure would like to pray about that. I'd like to take that to God, but I just don't feel worthy. You know who says that? Nobody. You just pray. So let me throw out another that we would never say out loud. Maybe the problem with our private prayer life is we don't feel the need. We treat Him like that tech. We treat Him like the troubleshooter. And we didn't have a lot of trouble today. Most of our days isn't filled with chaos. That's why the ones that are kind of stick out like they do. Most of our day, I'm going to guess most of the people in this room today looked a lot like yesterday. Today looked a lot like last Wednesday. Nothing got sideways. Nothing got upside down. We talked last night about the difference between needs and wants. We've got them both. Are our needs met? Yeah. How much of our wants are met? It's something we didn't really need, but we wanted it, and we got it too. Let those days pile up. Let a week of that happen. Let a month of that happen. Let our life kind of become that autopilot thing. You know what happens? Self-sufficiency happens. You know what happens? We stop depending on Him because I didn't need Him today. And we might say, I'm too busy, but that's really not the problem. We might say, I don't know what to say. We might say, I don't feel worthy. But when the rubber's hitting the road, we pray. Maybe our private prayer life's biggest issue is we just don't always see the need to. Which is how ridiculous is that? We face temptation every day, and we think we don't need Him. We go up against Satan every day, and we think we don't need Him. We make decisions every day, some more important than others, granted, but we're making decisions every single day. We are expected to be light and salt to everybody we meet every day. And we're going to sit here and think, I don't need Him? Is indifference the answer? Is that the word? It happens. Whatever we want to call it. I'm guessing every adult in this room has felt it. We just look back at our life with shame, in which we just had big gaps. Well, we weren't talking to Him very much. And it was all on us. Private prayers. Now, there won't be public prayers here until again tomorrow night. Private prayers. I'm in total control of that. You're in total control of that. Can we be better at it? And if we do get better at it, what changes in our life? If our prayer life improves, you think our morals would improve? Just think about that. 1 + 1 = 2. If I'm talking to God more, my communication with Him is more, my relationship grows, the closeness grows, does my morals get better? If my private prayer life grows, do my priorities get better? If private prayer life grows, does my worship get better? If private prayer life grows, does my godliness get better? Does my spiritual life improve? And to go back to Sunday, my spiritual, private prayer life improves. Does my faith increase? I increase how much I talk to Him. Does my faith increase? Does my conviction increase? What increases if we take care of this? If it is true that it's the big missing piece in our life, Satan's really, really happy about that. Because the last thing he wants is for your faith to increase and your godliness to increase and your light to increase. He doesn't want any of that. Private prayer life can improve all of it. Talk to Him. Isn't that amazing? I doubt I'm not going to say nobody, it's a big room. I wonder how many in this room could get the mayor on the phone. How many in this room could get the governor on the phone? How many in the room can get a senator or congressman on the phone? All of us that are Christians can communicate with God. Waiting for that. What an incredible blessing. Get your psalm books out. Does God acknowledge your prayers? Now, He is omniscient. He hears every squeak of a mouse. I'm not asking what does He hear. I'm asking what does He acknowledge? Does He acknowledge your prayers? Well, you have to be His child for that. That's an incredibly blessed relationship. God hearing our prayers, wonderful thing. But you've got to be His. So if you believe Jesus is the Son of God, this room would love to hear you confess it. If you believe He died for your sins, this room is filled with people that love to know you've repented of them. If you believe baptism will wash sins away, this room's full of people that love to see that happen. And it can happen tonight, and your prayers go into the throne of glory. For those of us that are Christians, does God acknowledge your prayers? Are you still in relationship with Him? Is there anything that would hinder it? Because whatever it is, you got to deal with it. And you need to deal with it right now. Because you're going to have to pray before this day's over. Before this night is over. Before this next temptation might be. You're going to have to pray. If it's something's hindering it, deal with it. Because tonight would be a great night. This room's full of people that love to pray for you and with you. Do it while we stand and sing.